Welcome, everybody. Our session is entitled B'nai Mitzvah, Creating Meaningful Coming-of-Age Ceremonies for Jewish People with Disabilities. Our presenters will be myself, Howard Blas, Shelly Christensen, and Gabrielle Kaplan-Meyer. And I will be speaking first about what exactly is a bar or bat mitzvah, and what are some traditional and innovative ways to celebrate this life cycle event for people with disabilities. And then Gabby will speak about a parent's perspective, followed by Shelly speaking about saying yes to belonging. In the Jewish religion, bar mitzvah is a really important life cycle event. It marks the age when traditionally a Jewish boy reaches the age where he is expected to perform mitzvot, to perform commandments, to follow traditional Jewish law. Yet there is actually no biblical source for this ceremony. And in fact, the only place in our tradition where there is sort of a source is in the Mishnah, in the oral law, in what's called the Ethics of the Fathers, where it says that at 13, one becomes obligated to follow the commandments. There are some early sources about girls celebrating this event, which is known as a bat mitzvah. But actually, the first formal acknowledgement of this event was actually as recent as 1922, nearly 100 years ago, by the daughter of a famous rabbi named Mordechai Kaplan. Today, the rabbis seem to know that girls mature faster than boys, and traditionally the age of bat mitzvah was 12, but today many observe this at 12 or at 13. So how do we typically celebrate a bar or bat mitzvah? Most often, if you've ever attended a bar or bat mitzvah, it would have taken place on a Saturday morning on the Jewish Shabbat or Sabbath, or in the context of a prayer service at a different time, usually when the Torah, the 5 books of Moses scroll, is read. It could be on a Saturday afternoon. We also read from it on Mondays and Thursdays, the beginning of Jewish months, and also on Jewish holidays. It's often in a synagogue, traditionally. The child who comes up to the Torah scroll will say blessings, may lead all or part of the service for the congregation, will chant biblical portions, oftentimes deliver a speech known as a Devar Torah, words of Torah, about the weekly portion or some other important aspect of Judaism, and of course, followed by some type of reception or party. Yet, and this is really the most important, probably the key to our presentation today, bar or bat mitzvah marks a change of status. People often talk about getting bar mitzvah or having a bar mitzvah, but you actually become bar mitzvah. And I like to say when families are a little bit skeptical that I'm telling them the truth, I tell them you could take it to really the extreme and to the absurd and say that you could stay in your pajamas under the covers, simply turn 13, and your status has changed. And yet, even though it can happen automatically, there is a lot of time traditionally spent on preparation. And no one's expected to really understand this slide. This is all Hebrew, but on the right side of the slide, that right column, you'll see Hebrew written with vowels, with vowel pointing, and with the traditional chanting. That's how a child may begin to learn. And then as you move to the middle, that's what a typical section of the biblical text looks like. And then on the left side, that's what the person sees in front of him or her in the Torah scroll. No vowels, no musical notes, and no punctuation. So this is really no easy task for anyone. This is not simple. So if you factor into that a child having disabilities, the system can often break down. And I put down a few possible reasons: intellectual functioning, attentional issues, emotional, behavioral, sensory, mobility, anxiety, other mental health issues. These are all reasons that the traditional bar mitzvah way of marking it could really break down. So what are some options? And I begin by noting really this, probably one important option to consider is the same option as any typical bar or bat mitzvah. I find it very difficult to predict for whom bar or bat mitzvah will be easy or difficult. I've taught kids for probably 35 years, and it's really hard to know. It's a very different type of skill. So a child with a disability may have a typical bar mitzvah, but there are fortunately lots of other options. Remembering that your status changes automatically. It can involve celebrating on a different day. The reason I note this is that traditionally, Sabbath observers would not allow technology, microphones, visual screens, but on other days, it's usually permitted. Having it in a non-synagogue setting may also, a smaller setting might make it easier. Adapting the service, shortening it, making it more musical, really anything is possible. So really, in the rest of my presentation, I just want to go through a bunch of options. These are all students that I've been connected to over the years. So we begin with Alexa, a young woman with Down syndrome wearing the Mickey Mouse ears. There's a Jewish holiday called Purim, where we read the biblical book of Esther, a very fun holiday. Who could not be having a good time if you're wearing Mickey Mouse ears and your father is dressed up in a clown costume, and all the guests are as well. So this was one very fun setting to celebrate bat mitzvah. In this slide, this is a young man named Jake. Jake sadly was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was 2 years old. The brain tumor was removed. He went on to have a very nice life until sadly passing away a couple of months ago. But he did not have the ability to use his speech, but he was able to use a Dynavox augmented communication device to lead parts of the service, to come to the Torah, to deliver a speech. That's another option. Sarah, similarly, does not have a lot of words, and she has mobility issues. She was a camper of mine in a summer camp program for many years, loved Jewish tradition, loved holding on to a plush Torah, loved the objects of Judaism. And at her bat mitzvah, she pushed a PowerPoint. She activated the PowerPoint presentation. She did many of the tactile things, holding the Torah, opening up the ark, things like that. This is a wonderful student of mine and wonderful parents. If you're familiar with Blue's Clues, yes, there was Jews Clues. Max's mom knew that that would be a motivator, that Jews Clues and French fries would be a motivator to get Max through the lessons. And at the service, it was very much a tribute to Max. He also worked with a clergy member. We call that a cantor, a singer, a prayer leader in our tradition. She played music. He loved her instruments. She even felt comfortable with him touching her voice box and feeling the reverberation. And this was a celebration of Max. Another wonderful option is Israel, changing the venue. One could celebrate Bar Mitzvah in Israel in a number of holy places, the Western Wall, Masada, the biblical nature preserve called Neot Kedumim. We've done a number of Bar Mitzvahs at our Jewish summer camp. As you can see, it's a much more relaxed setting, surrounded by peers with and without disabilities and family members coming to celebrate. Here's an example of Camp Jake. This was sort of a DIY, a do-it-yourself bar mitzvah. Who would be nervous when you could wear shorts and a t-shirt, pick up your guests in a golf cart? It's kind of like a destination wedding. People were doing zip lining and hanging out before the bar mitzvah. And then finally, this is Lisa's art gallery bat mitzvah. No pictures of Lisa. She wouldn't have liked that. But Lisa did not like to sing, did not like to speak, but was a very talented artist. So guests came and walked gallery style, cocktail party style, to look at our artwork on easels. So that's a quick run through. I could have put up dozens more slides of different options, but bar and bat mitzvah, this is the take-home message. It's a celebration of the child coming of age, and the possibilities are endless. So a few questions to keep in mind. Based on the slides, what are some traditional and more creative ways people mark bar or bat mitzvah? I gave you a few ideas. And then how might you incorporate this approach in your own faith tradition?
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Kaplan-Meyer, and I work with families across the Jewish community in the greater Philadelphia area where I live and work at Jewish Learning Venture. But I'm actually going to share with you very personally about my son George's bar mitzvah, which took place 5 years ago. It's hard to believe. That's a photo of our family, including my husband Fred and my daughter June, with George and I. George is a fabulous son who loves music. He loves nature. He loves celebrating the Jewish holidays at home. And George has a combination of complex disabilities, profound autism, intellectual disability, as well as bipolar disorder. So he has a very high level of support needs, and that will factor into the way we designed his bar mitzvah. But at the core of what we chose to do was to create a celebration of his soul and his strengths and just the wonderful human being that he is. So I want to begin by sharing a little bit about George's spiritual life. He is nonverbal. Um, he has been learning to communicate his needs and his wants on a Proloquo app on his iPad. He's been working on that for probably 7 or 8 years and increasing in his abilities with it over time. But expressing abstract things like about God or prayer or spirituality isn't something that he's able to do through his app. So we have a sense about his spiritual life more from the experience of being together, being with him at synagogue, or in other moments where he seems especially connected to what's happening. And I'm going to share with you just a few seconds. It's an almost 2-minute video, but we'll just watch a little. This is from George's bar mitzvah rehearsal. He loves music, as I mentioned, and he loves the musician Modest Yahoo, who's a contemporary Jewish pop star, and especially this song called One Day. And so our rabbi, Sean Zevet, at our congregation Mishkan Shalom, is very musical. And so we decided together that he would sing One Day on guitar at the end of George's service. And my brother is also a musician and he's joining with him. So this is our rehearsal. We're sitting, as you can see, in a very empty sanctuary. The only people besides our immediate family and the rabbi were my sister and my brother and their kids. That's George's cousin Jake sitting next to him. So it was a very relaxed atmosphere. And I want you to just watch a few seconds with me and notice George's body and notice his really holding in his body this experience of the song and the rhythm of the song.
It's not about we all lose when they beat us. Souls of innocent blood transparent. Keep on moving through the waters they rage. In this stage you could lose your way. Your way. In my time you crazy. My soul and things you no way.
So I could show you the whole thing, but I want to go on to some other important elements. But I really wanted you to experience what it looks like when we see George in synagogue, feeling connected and loving the music, going really all through his being. So we wanted to create a service that would draw on all of George's strengths. So one thing, Howard mentioned a Devar Torah, sort of speech about the Torah that's traditionally given. Another thing George loves is colors. He loves bright colors. Since he was a little kid, he loved to finger paint and to color with markers. So his Torah portion was about the parting of the sea. And so we had a friend of ours who's an artist draw those black lines that represented the sea parting in the book of Exodus. And George and I read a lot of books and watched a lot of videos, and he was already familiar with the story because of our tradition of telling it at Passover time. And this is George's creation. This was his finger painting. There's glitter there. And we talked about what we imagined the sea looked like when people went through. And this hung in the sanctuary. George, because of his love of nature, we shared video during the service showing George out in nature. The service was an hour long, which was just the appropriate amount of time for him. As Howard mentioned, there are different dates. A bar mitzvah doesn't have to take place on a Saturday morning on the Sabbath. So we did a Monday morning service. It was actually George's 13th birthday. And we were very conscious not to have too many guests, which could cause a lot of sensory overwhelm for George. We made sure to have a quiet space. This is the chapel next to the larger sanctuary, where George had the permission when he needed to leave and come at any time to a quiet space. He had noise canceling headphones. And this is one moment we had practice putting on the prayer shawl, which Jewish people wear during morning services. And for George, it was not comfortable from a sensory perspective, the feeling of that shawl over the clothes. So we had a very brief blessing giving him this prayer shawl. We put it on and then we took it off. It was done. We didn't push it. We made sure that the celebration following George's service would be something that he would really enjoy. This is a picture of his wonderful music therapist playing guitar. He did kids music that was very participatory and engaging. And we also made sure to have one of George's favorite babysitters there so that my husband and I could be hosts and could really enjoy the celebration. So I say that it was a milestone moment for George. I know he couldn't express it in words, but he certainly expressed in his being how present he was for the service. It was a milestone for my husband and me to celebrate this journey of parenting, which came with many challenges and many blessings, and also for our extended family to come together. Many people, when we sent out the invitation, cousins, aunts, uncles, friends said, you know, honestly, they didn't know that George could have a bar mitzvah. They had never been to an experience like this. And so it was really a powerful moment for all of us. So some questions that I offer to you to take back into the communities where you work is, how can we nurture the spiritual lives of people with intellectual disabilities or nonverbal people with autism or other reasons they may be nonverbal? And how can we all create sensory friendly prayer spaces? So that option to have a quiet space, headphones, all the things that make prayer possible for people with sensory sensitivities are always present. So thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Shelly Christensen, and I'm going to talk about belonging in this portion of the presentation. As my husband and I stood beneath the chuppah, or the marriage canopy, we were setting our path to raise Jewish children. So from the time we knew we were expecting our first child, plans were already laid for his bar mitzvah, even though it was a good 13 years plus in the future. We didn't focus on details. Instead, we sought to find a synagogue home that gave us a sense of belonging. That's, I believe, what all of us want in our lives, no matter what our goals are for participation. We just want to belong. Well, we're lucky. We found that synagogue home when our oldest son was 2. Now we could start planning for his bar mitzvah. Actually, there is truth to that. We weren't just looking for any open door. We wanted him to attend a religious school that provided a meaningful Jewish education and a strong sense of belonging to the Jewish people and to his community. We were looking for a partner. And I think that really is essential. As you've heard from Howard and Gabby, that is one of the secrets to success. Let's go to the next slide. There is a proverb that you might want to keep in mind as parents, clergy, educators, tutors, teachers. Teach each child according to their way. Even when they are old, they will not depart from it. Every child is unique. Besides adapting and modifying and using creativity in preparation, as well as the ceremony, Doing all of this in the spirit of belonging for any child is an opportunity to support the child and the family through many months of learning. One parent I know was surprised when her rabbi called to discuss choosing a date for her son's bar mitzvah. Her son was non-speaking, and for that reason, she assumed that a bar mitzvah ceremony was just out of the question. Well, the rabbi reassured her that they would find a way to make this meaningful for her son and for her family and for the congregation. The date was set, and thus began a collaboration that ended with a meaningful and joyful ceremony marking this young man's becoming an adult in the eyes of the Jewish community. The single act of that phone call from the rabbi told her that her entire family belonged. Next slide, please. I think of life cycle events such as bar and bat mitzvah as a birthright. You belong here is not just a catchy phrase. It tells a great deal about the community. Religious communities must be committed to including all children in life cycle education and celebrations. The keys to success are understanding an individual's style of learning, adapting the curriculum, and maintaining communication between parents and clergy, teachers, tutors, and of course, the child. The preparation process in itself can be enormously enriching for everyone involved. To the greatest extent, children with disabilities should be included with their peers without disabilities for life cycle event preparation, bar and bat mitzvah, confirmation, and other group celebrations. This is belonging. Many children are nervous or intimidated when they begin studying for such an important occasion. With thoughtful guidance, children with disabilities will be able to understand and make meaning of important religious milestones in their lives. This is belonging. Next slide, please. Yes, just say yes. Say yes to success. Well, what is success for each student? As parents, as tutors, as clergy, as involved in this child's life, we can keep our eyes on that big picture, on that end result. But for our students, if they do that, they'll miss all of the small successes along the way that add up to a day of confidence and joy. Encouraging patience and curiosity is the biggest gift we can give our children. Instead of them thinking, I'm trying, but it's not working, I'm a failure, they can understand that it's the small steps, making a set time to practice, learning small bits at a time rather than tackling, for example, a full verse. They will succeed. It will all come together. Next slide. I had a student in my rookie years of my tutoring career. I haven't been tutoring as long as Howard. I'm only at 23 years. My student was legally blind. I enlarged the photocopy of all the text we used and made him a recording. After trying to do things my way for a few weeks, I asked him what he usually does when he has to read something new. He pulled me into his world at that point and said, this isn't like reading, it's like learning a song. I can just listen to the recording and I'll be able to learn it. And he did. The first week after we tried this new process, he knew 5 verses of his Torah portion, and he continued to learn in this way. And then eventually he could point to each word in Hebrew and chant them directly from the Torah scroll, as Howard showed you in his presentation. All I did was ask him what works for him and support him to run with it. Well, I've repeated this strategy countless times with my students. It doesn't always click on the first try or the second, and many times we change learning strategies again, and that's okay. What matters is that a student has the tools to succeed, to individually succeed. And many of those own tools are their own attributes and learning styles. Next slide. We are so glad that you're joining Howard, Gabby, and me for this video for Community for All. Bar and Bat Mitzvah is a life cycle event in the Jewish faith. No matter what your tradition is, there are important milestones that affirm, commit, and declare the faith, rituals, and traditions. Each one is strengthened by a sense of belonging at each stage. List the life cycle events, think about those in your faith tradition, and answer these questions. How are people with disabilities and mental health conditions currently supported in their preparations and in the ceremonies of their life cycle events? That's number one. And the second question, what changes can you make to ensure an individual's learning styles, preferences, and strengths are incorporated into preparations and ceremonies? Finally, think about a time when you witnessed a person with a disability participate in their own life cycle event. Think about the pride they felt and the palpable sense of accomplishment and confidence. Think about the joy of their family as their hopes and dreams become reality. And think about how you felt at this sacred moment in time. Thank you all for watching. And we want to thank Faith Inclusion Network for inviting us to Community for All. And please, please feel free to reach out to any of us with your questions or thoughts. And we'll see you again. Thank you.